At that moment, I began to laugh. Of course I did. It was ridiculous. I mean, that should have been the last thing I was doing. Dehydrated on the motorway as the 5 a.m. sun rose upon my face, fingers gripping the steering wheel, pushing pedal to the metal, as a madman in a white truck chased me. But yeah, a smile was on my face. Why? Because a song came on the radio. You probably know the one. Ever fallen in love with someone you shouldn't have fallen in love with? You know it, right? I mean, come on now. What are the odds? As I looked in my side mirror, I could just about see him. Glistening white, gritted turkey teeth, black greased back hair as he leant over his steering wheel. There was no doubt in his mind. He was getting me. So, do you want to hear how I got here? Why the hell I turned up to that town in the first place, I barely know, but that was a part of the thrill. It wasn't supposed to make sense because that's how adventures happen, right? You dive in and you figure it out after. That's the definition of adventure. And I think that's what I wanted. I had spoken to the landlady a few times over the phone and I'd been renting one of her rooms. It wasn't complicated. I turned up to her door with a rucksack on my back, and there was a woman of nearly 50. She'd managed to stay slim, about 5'4", and more black hair than I care to mention. It somehow reminded me of storm clouds, uncontrolled and everywhere. "You must be Daniel," she said. The smile came quietly. Hindsight tells me it was a bit more than a smile. I kept myself to myself, spending most of the time in my room, reading and watching documentaries on YouTube. Visits to the landing and kitchen, met by her, became increasingly lurid. I knew her intentions after that time she touched my elbow and laughed when I hadn't said anything funny. I really knew when the silk night dresses came out. Why I didn't act on it was nothing against her. I just don't like complications. And the grey areas would have been profound. So I decided I need to get out more, especially on the weekends, because I knew after a gin, too many, a knock on my door was coming in the dead of night. Best to get out on Friday and Saturday. That's what I decided to do when the weekend rolled around. The thing is, I hadn't exactly moved to New York or Paris. It was a town called Crowsborough. Ever heard of it? Don't worry, neither had I. And truth be told, there wasn't much there. And that had been a part of the strange allure for me. I really wanted to drop myself in it, and boy did I do that. Considering that now, I guess that was probably a part of it. They're really not used to outsiders. So, if I wanted to get social, there was only really one option. Throwing myself into the arts wasn't happening. A book club? Bit weird. Sport? I don't think this place cared much for him. Of course, it was drinking. I had seen 3 places, and one was a Wetherspoons, and I discounted that pretty quickly. Remember, I wanted adventure. But there was 2 other places on either side of the town that looked dripping in character. Well, I'll say that, not charm. I mean, one was literally dripping in a green mould on the outside of its wall. So, I remember Friday night rolling round. The landlord always seemed friskiest on the weekends, due to her being off work and wanting something to do. Literally. So, it was time for me to put on my jeans and head out somewhere safer. So I thought. It was a funny town. Isolated, working class. It had a feel about it. Destitute. A place that was doomed to be dying forever but never actually die. You know them places, where industry once thrived but had now dried up. The money gone but the people remain, wondering how to pass the days, resorting to alcohol and cigarettes, because there's nothing better else to do. I passed angry-looking youths under a darkening sky, barely holding on to their big-headed dogs. And that's when I saw a glimmer of light. That being the flickering multicolour of a bandit or electrical jukebox. I couldn't quite tell as I stood on the other side of the road. Stood outside its door was two guys with silver chains around their necks and tattoos going up them. One was in a sky blue Fred Perry top, blowing smoke and scowling at me as I walked past him and entered a pub called the Red Lion. It was very dull inside, and practically everyone looked at me. I put my head down in a sort of I'm no trouble kind of way, and walked over to the bar directly opposite me. Cheap, bright-coloured, fruity liquids of alcohol littered the back of the bar, and the usual cheap lagers were on tap. But it was a ruby beer, called Ruby Beer, that caught my eye. "What you having?" said a surprisingly pretty girl behind the bar, with curly blonde hair and chewing gum. I thought she looked very 80s. Maybe it had something to do with the small mole on the top of her lip that reminded me of Madonna. Does Madonna have a mole on the top of her lip? I digress. "Hi, I'll have a ruby beer, please." She didn't reply, or smile. She just held eye contact as she pulled the pump. As the beer landed in front of me, I pulled out my bank card. "Cash only," she said, with a bit of a snap. Fair enough, I thought, handing it over. As I turned around to face the pub, taking a drink of my beer, I could see two pool tables, and both were occupied. And on one were three gentlemen, who were taking a particular staring to me. All in shirts, long sleeves, and hair slicked back. And I mean, they were really staring. Most of the pub had given me that "who be going there" look when I walked in, and then just gone back to their lives. But these three were really looking at me with a sort of a look I can only describe as new meat. As I took my second and bigger gulp of beer, I thought I might need the alcohol as I tried to avoid these blatant stares. And that's when I noticed one walking over to me over the top of my beer. "Now then, where you from?" "Alright." I said, "Where you from?" "Lincolnshire, originally." "Never heard of it. You see Tommy over there?" he said, pointing towards the pool table. Yeah." "He wondered if you'd be fancying doubles or not." Immediately, there was an internal sigh of relief. And of course I did. In fact, that's exactly what I wanted. "Sure," I said, with a grin. It turned out Tommy, who wanted me, was the older one, and to have a guess I would say he was about 5 years older, maybe a little more than me. But he was also the tightest lipped. The other two were in the early 20s, and a lot more chatty. Now, I can play pool, mostly thanks to a Christmas present bought in 2001, a pool table, before the times of smartphones and the internet. And as a teenager, I was down a snooker hall. I can strike a ball. I found the game reasonably easy, in fact. And these guys weren't bad, but the simple fact was, I was better. A fact Tommy the Elder didn't take too kindly to. And after me and my pool partner won 6 games in a row, that's when Tommy broke his silence. "Hey, you and me singles. Let's see this," he said, pointing the tip of his cue in my face. With a grimace and a grin, I held up my hands in a sort of surrender kind of way and said, "Sure thing, Tommy. Just, let me get another one of these," I said, tipping my beer his way. When I returned to the table, he had them racked up, and he broke with anger. Maybe it had something to do with my 6th ruby beer, but I went around that table and I knocked in the yellows one by one. You ever hear people say that they play better with a pint in them? Well, I guess there's truth in it. Because, I kid you not, in less than a minute, I had just the black left. And as I got down to hit it, knowing I couldn't miss, I closed my eyes. I hit the ball in, heard the black sink down the pocket, but before I could open my eyes, my eye was hit. leaving for certain a black eye in the morning. I hit the floor and heard the commotion. Apart from the floor, the only thing I remember was the barmaid's voice. "Tommy, get out of here!" And thankfully, he was making an exit. A kick to the head never came. Tommy's relatives, they didn't care to look at me. As they went back to their beers, it was one lone 60-year-old man, I approximate, standing by the bar who said to me, "Get yourself up off the floor, lad. You're making yourself look bad." And that was it. As I slowly rose, everyone was back to their beer. I briefly considered another ruby beer, standing at the bar with that beautiful barmaid staring at me, looking somewhat annoyed at me chewing her gum, before thinking, that's enough for one night. Honestly, there was barely a hangover, more of a face-over. Looking in the bathroom mirror the next morning, barely daring to go towards my face. Tommy had got me good. The bruise was coming through nicely. I spent most of the next day doing little, mostly avoiding the landlady, which I did to great success, almost. She was actually knocking on my door. I didn't feel my face too much, but it was making me feel tired. But the pain was starting to really come through. Ignoring the knocks at some point became not an option, and there was only one surprising answer that was clear. I needed another drink. 1 minute, I shouted. Why? Just getting changed. Oh, does that mean you're naked then? I didn't answer. My jeans were on. I unlocked the door. Damn, she was in her underwear. What's wrong with you? She asked. I'm just heading out, I said, trying to slip past her. She grabbed my arm tight and forced me to turn to face her. What happened to your eye? She asked, letting go of my arm in a small shock. Just a little accident, I said, slipping away, leaving her so lonely in that corridor. Again, it was raining, and I walked into that morbid town, beginning to wonder what the hell I was doing here. But the red line was out of bounds, so I headed in the opposite direction. And after a 5-minute walk in the rain, I came to the Peacock pub, and I don't believe I had ever wanted a drink so bad in my life. With barely a consideration for the pub and its occupants, I was stood at the bar, in a much quieter place than the Red Lion, drinking my merry way into zombification. And that's when a hand touched my elbow. Steady on there now. I was looking into thirsty eyes, and I know it's cliche, but I was transfixed. She was skinny for sure, but her breasts never got the memo. And there was something hot in her rebellion, in the absence of a bra. Are you just gonna look at my boobs or give me a drink? She giggled, with an ever so slight overbite. Hey Sarah now, will you get me and this lad some shots? He's paying now, aren't you? Again, she touched my arm, but this time with a wink, and she never asked about my eye. The bar stool she was on kept getting closer and closer, and it didn't matter what I said because whatever syllables came out of my mouth, she seemed to like. As consistently, cheap multicoloured shots of alcohol made their way down our necks. I don't know how much time passed, but when Michael Jackson's The Way You Make Me Feel came on, she took my hand, and there we was, just me and her, dancing around the pool table. Where the hell was I? A trailer? The back of a girl's head? In her bed? And she's naked? How's this happened? Slipping on my jeans again to get away from somewhere I don't want to be, opening that trailer door as the morning sun just begins to appear over the horizon on a field. Someone's walking near me. I can hear their footsteps, unsteady and unsure. Jesus, no. You! It's Tommy. He's coming in, and I'm going out. There's no time for words. His legs begin to pump on the gravel ground leading to his trailer, and I'm gone, running in the opposite direction, and I don't look back. As I run across a field towards the sun, trying to get my bearings. Quickly, I make sense of the town, seeing its buildings, the church, and where my house must be, and I begin to sprint. Over a fence, into someone's garden, then onto a main street. Tommy's not behind me, but as I begin to jog, I realise how much trouble I'm in. If he smacked me after losing a game of pool, then, well, yeah, this is probably the most serious moment of my life. As I get to mine, there's no thoughts of bed, chilling, laying low. Oh no, I'm on the run, big time. I grab my car keys and head back out. And it's probably the best decision of my life. Because there's Tommy, in a white work van at the bottom of the street. And yeah, here I am now, smiling, laughing, as the radio plays. And he hasn't given in. It's been 2 hours now. Where am I going? I don't know. But, to be honest, I got what I wanted, right? An adventure.